So I'm Mark Whittaker from Eco Driver, and I'm here as the driver trainer for you folk from Green Ideas today. Actually, we want people to accelerate at a reasonable speed, and I suggest about quarter throttle or quarter of the amount of the accelerator, so they get to their target speed at a reasonable time. And then what we do is we say, lift your foot for an instant, just an instant, and then feather it back on to hold the speed that you want. So you'll use more fuel while accelerating, but you'll reach your more efficient light throttle cruise sooner. So we generally want people to increase their following distances, but we have a specific reason apart from safety. So you can imagine that if you're following someone that's very close, and you then get forced to look at what they're doing very closely. You can't read the things that are going on ahead, and it means that every time they slow down, you end up having to slow down. Every time they accelerate, it's like they have an invisible tow rope and they pull you along as well. So they start to control your driving, and that ruins your fuel economy ability. So what we try to get people to do is hang back a bit and let them speed up and slow down around you and try and keep a more constant speed. So consciously try to drive as smoothly as you can and try to minimise the use of accelerator, brake and steering. And I say that every time you squeeze on the accelerator, you squeeze fuel into the engine, so you want to try and keep that fixed as much as possible too. So we suggest that people keep the tyre pressures at the top end of the manufacturer's spec and check them once a month. So what I tend to find is that people hold their gears too long though. They don't necessarily accelerate very hard, but they'll hold the gears till the revs are quite high. And I say if you want to go fast, that's fine, use lots of this and rev them, but if you want to drive economically, then change a bit earlier. So we sort of recommend 2,000 to 2,500 revs. Even if you've got an auto, this technique that I talked about of driving up to your target speed and then lifting and feathering, the auto will change up to the highest gear it can at that point, and then try and maintain that high gear as you put the foot back on the accelerator gently. And here we go to number 7, and watch your speed. Well, that's obvious, everyone knows that going faster uses more fuel, but actually the average person doesn't appreciate quite how much. If you were to drive at 110 rather than 100 kilometres an hour, you use between 10 and 15% more fuel. If you were then to drive at 120 rather than 110, you use another 20% on top of that, so it really goes up exponentially. And then we come to turn it off. And this is something that's interesting, and the cars are improving a little bit here, but the key thing for me here is air conditioning. And air conditioning is a good safety feature, so I don't recommend that people don't use it. I'm just saying you should use it when it's needed. What we say is, this morning when I got in my car, I didn't garage it overnight, actually last night, so it was all fogged up inside when I got into it because it's humid, and I turned the air conditioning on to clear the car out, and then I turn it off again. Or if it's really hot, it's better to, and you're getting drowsy or something, you're better to run your air conditioning, so safety is first. But it's a straight hit on the fuel economy. And all the other electrical consumers around a car, people seem to think often that the electrical things are free energy, but actually the battery gets drained, it's topped up by the alternator, which is driven by the petrol or diesel engine, so you're burning fuel to do that. So we just say to people, if you don't need it, turn it off, and that's basically the rule. So it's right, Mark said turn the air conditioning off, it saves some fuel. I know, I'm on the motorway, I'll wind my windows down, but that's, as you probably alluded to, that's actually worse. Right. So beyond about 50 kilometres an hour on average, it actually causes more drag and reduces your fuel consumption more than air conditioning would.
Right. So around town, on the flip side of it.
Exactly.
Keep the window down rather than running your back on.
So if it's comfortable to have your window down below about 50 kilometres an hour, perfect.
I've got about a 60 kilogram bag of tools in the back of my hatchback, and I'm just like, yeah, maybe I'll take that out. Right. You can actually feel that it's gone when you're driving.
Well, 50 kilos on average is 1 to 2%.
Right.
So it's measurable.
Yeah.
Which is why Mazda wanted 3 or 4% improvement, and they could do it with weight. And then they'll have a whole lot of other things that they're doing as well. And it's one thing that people can do without having to change their driving habits, which contributes to the car being more economical. So it's a very important one. So I ask people to use the fuel computers and keep the instantaneous gauge as their default. What's coasting? Well, what I want people to do is consider when they have to come to a stop, is to lift off at some point, so that the car will naturally come to a stop. And that feels really strange for people because they've never done it. They're used to driving and then braking at an appropriate point. And they're worried about people behind, they're going to find that strange. And I said, but if you're genuinely coming to a stop, then it's not an issue, because as soon as you stop, any angst that they had has disappeared. So, and as I've said, keep the car in gear, because using neutral not only actually uses more fuel, it's a dangerous technique because you've lost an element of control of your car.
Hi, I'm Greg Roughan from Green Ideas, and I'm about to hop in a car with Mark Whitaker, who's going to show us how to drive a little more efficiently, save some money, and use a little bit less petrol. Let's go.
So what we're going to do a little bit further along here is when we turn off at Green Lane, is you're going to discover that your fuel gauge is right on the bottom and you're just about out of fuel, and you're worried about that we're actually going to have to now get out and push this car home because we're going to run out of fuel. So the task then is to drive us back to the office for the minimum fuel use. Okay, so we're going off here. So now we're going to sort of think about, you've just discovered that you're completely out of fuel.
Right. So we're walking if I get this wrong.
So when you get to the top of this hill, we'll probably have to stop because it's quite a busy intersection. And if we do, pick a point where you can lift off and roll coast in gear to a stop.
Really think about changing to fourth, and I'm not calling you a big man, dear Mark, but I don't know if this little car will handle fourth.
Yeah, well, it doesn't mean you shouldn't use the gears normally, because labouring in gear, and we want to go straight, so just stay in this lane. Labouring in gear actually doesn't do your car any good. So you've actually done it beautifully. You've got it just about bang on. That's good. Now, it might have felt strange because you actually throttled off a long time ago and let the car roll, and the person behind may have thought it was a bit odd.
I felt very self-conscious about that, actually.
Yeah, but once you've come to a stop now, it's gone, because you haven't held them up at all, and they can see you haven't held it up. So if they thought it was a bit odd, then that's over. Now we're going to drop down the hill around here, and basically once you've got up to your speed, what we would normally do is drive up to the corner, brake, go around it, drop, accelerate again, even going downhill. There's no need. Gravity will do the work for us now.
And your recommendation is to stay in gear, not slip it into neutral?
You certainly can't slip it into neutral because you've then lost an element of control of your car. So one of the things about, especially when we go along this bit, is to try and keep your throttle even. Because every time you squeeze on, you squeeze, especially in this car actually, there's a thing called an accelerator pump. Every time you squeeze on the top, it squeezes in an extra squirt of fuel. So you want to avoid that.
It's got a little intimidated there by the shark bus.
Second time I've seen it today. It's getting nailed by this morning. And people often say, but I could go faster. So no, you could go closer, but you can't go faster. And this bit's interesting because we're going to come out to multiple sets of traffic lights along here, obviously, and that's where the coasting comes to its own, and the looking ahead and all those sorts of things.
It's really good for anticipation, isn't it? I remember in psychology we learned that back in university, there was a guy who thought he could change the traffic lights by shouting out, "Go green, go green!" And of course 50% of the time they would go green when he shouted at them, which really very strongly reinforced his belief that he could he had the magic ability to change the traffic lights. Go green! Go green!
So you did that well actually, because you accelerated up and you didn't continue up to 50k, because obviously, so you didn't waste a lot. Whereas, the typical person you get with does accelerate up to the speed that they're normally at, and then it is red now. So they waste a huge amount, and they're no faster.
Yeah.
It just feels faster because you've made it more of an effort at it. So now you did an interesting thing just then, rather than turn right probably. You knew that was coming up and you waited to accelerate till you got to it, where you could have built up a little bit beforehand and anticipated what's coming up. It's, you could have just done that differently, and then you would have gotten up there more easily.
Gotcha.
And that's the big difference between looking at what's going on for defensive driving versus fuel economy driving.
Right.
Actually, one helps the other, but you can use the information that you've got more so for fuel economy as well. So your rate of acceleration is about right. That's good, because you're accelerating, we're getting up to speed quite respectably, but you're not doing it as slowly as you could, and you don't want to. So that's nice, and you change.
So even just the year where I sort of felt like I was being a bit cheeky and thought, right,
that one was a bit more, but the other ones that you've been doing, it's about the right rate. It's a fairly natural rate, but the trick is when you get there is to lift off a little bit and then go back on gently. And if you had been a driver in a car with an airbag, one of the things I would have said to you is you don't want to put your hands up there.
Really?
Yeah. So generally it's called to 3 these days.
Right.
Because if you are unfortunate enough to be in an accident, airbags will break your arms.
Right.
As often people get in, start their car, and then they
put their belt on.
Yeah, do all the other things.
Can't think what did I
No,
do?
you didn't. But you don't want to do that, because actually the car's designed to be started and driven.
Right.
And then people often do all the other things and turn them off last. So I always say it's last on, first off with the engine.
Right.
Could we have gone any faster?
We've gone faster at the end.
No, sorry, not at the end.
Would we have got here
Any quicker?
I don't think so. Those lights really just would have held us up.
And, assuming you stuck to the speed limit, which you did approximately, there was traffic for quite a lot of the way, and traffic lights. So I don't think even if you tried to go much faster, you would have gained much at all.
Not that I would have broken the law to do so.
Yeah. So the upshot of that is then, if you were doing a scenario of trying to drive back as economically as you can, you've just proved to yourself that you can do that and not cost yourself any time. So why not do that all the time?
It's not the hugest thing in the world, and we're realistic about it being a petrol-driven economy in this country. But if you can fuel up less often, it's just that little bit better.
I had some notes for you, and I said your acceleration was at quite a good rate. You did that, and I don't know whether that's always you, but what you did in that scenario worked well. You changed at about the right point. You weren't too hard on your car. You were still gentle on the car, so that was fine. Things that you could practice doing are lifting and feathering, because you were used to just going back to a position that you know,
Right.
which sometimes was too much because we then had to lift off. So you could practice that. You could look ahead more, and you look ahead quite well, but you don't use the information for fuel economy much, because you've never thought about doing that maybe in that way. And that means that could lead to you coasting more and braking less, because those two things are linked. And so your gear changes were good. You accelerated at quite a good rate. You could work on keeping your throttle constant. So if I was to put a plan together for you, there would be about three or four things in it. And generally, you had quite a good go at doing that.
Okay. Do you reckon we got back on the fuel that we had?
Well, we seem to have made it. I didn't have to push. So.
Alright, we've just come back from driving test with Mark from Z Energy, and he's given me a few pointers on my driving to save a bit of fuel. The main thing he said I could do was to look further ahead, so you can perhaps coast a bit more and brake a bit less, was his main point. So looking out for traffic lights that we know we're going to have to stop at anyway, and just coasting to a stop instead of driving all the way, using fuel all the way, and then braking and having to make up your speed again when the light goes green. The other one was a similar point, but on the motorway we left a bit more of a gap between us and the next car up ahead. Didn't get too stressed about people jumping in there and stealing our spot, but with that gap we got to be a little less reactive, and I noticed that as people tapped their brakes or slowed down little corners, I didn't have to react to them and then slow down myself. I could just coast on. And he made a few other pointers, just the real freebies. Taking weight out of your car. His point was every kind of 50 kgs in a car is about 1% of its fuel use over a year. So you might save about $50 a year. And the other thing was the tyres, keeping them pumped up to the specifications, which are usually printed on the inside of the door in here. Keeping those tyres pumped up means you roll a lot better, it's less friction, and you use less fuel, which is good for us, good for the planet, and hopefully saves us a bit of money at the end of the year.